uncertainty that is going on in this year, and no one knows how long it's going to last, right? Hypothetically, right? Since there's I like to look at this as, and in a lot of chaos historically, you can find order eventually, right? Mm-hmm, so it's really important to kind of just like sit back. Initially, to be completely honest, with myself, I was very reactive because it was so new, and I never in our lifetime it's a unified consciousness ever experienced something quite like this. But when I took a moment and we had more conversations, I was like, wait a second, this is an opportunity to really just like sit back and see how things can potentially play out, and what will rise to the top in order for our vibration as a whole to raise to a top. So in terms of healing, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was healing and thriving beyond 2020. And given that there's so much that is seemingly out of our control, what would you advise people, aside from like following your heart and your passion and everything, how would you advise people, given, again, like we can tie this back to like the history of the early 1900s to move forward and feel like there is some security for themselves?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think once you do kind of tune in and you say, okay, this is what I love and all of that, you really want to ask yourself, where in the side of history do you want to belong to? Because we are making history now. We're going to go in textbooks and be like, hey, this happened in the...
Which is so cool.
Right. And you have the opportunity, I would say, to say, what was your role in this change, right? And whether you're a healer, or whether you're a parent or you're a business owner, whatever it might be, how is it that you can facilitate the change towards the betterment of humanity? So that because I think humans are creatures of cooperation and community, and we're all interconnected in that way.
Yeah.
So looking into that, and I think humanity has 3 different ways that we can go. We can either literally go backwards and just be more chaotic and just be like, today I was talking to someone who was saying, like, I'm afraid New York's going to turn into how it was in the 70s and 80s.
Oh, wow.
How it was like so much crime out there and so much homelessness, we have the opportunity to just stay stagnant, which means that we go through this and nothing changes. Or we have the opportunity to move forward and evolve, because human beings are meant for evolution. And the evolution is not going to come through ours necessarily. We can evolve ourselves, but our children and our children's children, because we got to keep in mind that as much as our genetics hold trauma and hold emotion, what we're experiencing right now can be passed down through generations. And it's going to be interesting, because then in the future, in like 50 or 100 years, people are going to say like, oh yeah, they were born and their grandparents were born in the pandemic, or they were going through that, and you can literally trace that trauma back to that. So
it's interesting. Yeah. I was actually reading up, I want to say it was about like a year, maybe a little bit over a year ago, irrelevant. Anyway, I was listening to something from this psychologist about the fact that, at least it's been like at this point scientifically proven, that women can hold generational trauma physically. Like, this is now, we're not talking about like the energy of the trauma, but from like 3 generations prior. And why is that? In theory, well, not in theory anymore, in actuality, let's say a grandmother was living through war. War is a very tense environment. And she's pregnant with her daughter, and the daughter's ovaries in the womb develop it within the first trimester, essentially, just towards the end of the first trimester. So here you are, 3 generations in one, experiencing the same trauma, and your genetics ultimately start to shift to kind of envelop that as you live. So that's already physically proven. Now let's talk about the fact that science always continues to improve and develop and get debunked over and over and over again, right? So who knows how many generations it can potentially go back, but that's interesting.
And so keeping that in mind, also, how is it that you want to develop yourself right now for future generations? you know. I'm not a parent, but I will be a parent someday. So, but it's something that I'm thinking about. And, you know, I do a lot of self-work because we're not perfect. For that purpose as well, right? For the generations to come. So I think really looking back at the big picture, not being caught up on and reacting to things versus acting on things, which is a big difference. Reaction versus taking action. And just putting it all back to a plan, like, and working with people like yourself, you know, that take the time to work with someone on a one-on-one basis, right? It's really, really important right now more than ever, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, I try to drive this point across with people when I talk to them about why coaching is so important and why going through these kind of holistic modalities is important, because number one, there are so many Band-Aid approaches, but Band-Aid approaches, even by virtue of, like, again, genius minds figuring out the law of attraction, like, you're going to constantly attract the same root problem. It's just going to show up in different ways over and over and over again until you address it. Like, it can come to you very subtly, or it can literally come to you and feel like a 1-2 knockout punch. But it's really important to do the deep work and to really heal, because you only have one you, and there is so much that is seemingly through perception out of our control these days. But what we do have control of is ourselves, and how we can raise our own individual vibration. And what that means, again, is eating right, moving right, sleeping right, drinking right, like doing all of those things and practicing what you love. Because going back to even like closing the circle to what you said at the very beginning of the conversation, it's like your heart center has the capacity to impact the people around you. So by virtue of just loving yourself and doing anything in your power to control and take back power and full sovereignty into your health, you are impacting your first degree connections. And as a result of that, you're raising those people's vibrations, and then so forth and so on. So you, by taking care of yourself, is probably one of the most selfless acts that you could ever do, if that's something that's of concern. Like you're you know, a lot of people are like, well, I can't do this because I'm, you know, this is going to impact my dynamic with this person. Well, it might impact that person, but it could be one of the best things for that person too. Right. Right?
And one thing I'll say that my mentor, going into that, if you want to make a difference in yourself, your vision, your literal vision on the why it is that you're waking up that day needs to, and the purpose and the intention needs to be as big as your family, at least. Because if your vision is to change your family and to impact your family and to really influence your family or loved one, then you know you got yourself taken care of. So you need to step out yourself in order to change yourself, the vision. If the vision is to change the family, then the why you get up needs to be as big as the community. If you want to change the community, then the vision needs to be as big as the city. If you want to change the city, then the vision needs to be as big as the state. If you want to change the state, it needs to be a national vision. If you want to change the nation, it needs to be a world vision. And if you want to change the world, then the vision and the why you get up needs to be astronomical. That's why Plato used to teach his students not just to understand the mechanics of the universe, but to bring themselves into a perspective that they literally have the world in their hands. So when you're viewing the world and from that approach, then you got it. You know, you're more astronomical as opposed to singular.
So can we dive into that just a tiny bit more before we cap everything? What I'm understanding is, like, because that's a really interesting approach. Like, I've always come from the I, we, all mentality, and that's something that where I've studied at the AMAYU Institute, like, came into play, where it's like you, just by helping yourself, are ultimately going to help everybody else. But I'm very curious about this mentality. So when you're envisioning your support system, like if it's your blood family or like your chosen family, right? Like, how is that your why? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so really understanding, number one, what does love mean to you, and two, why are you doing this through love? Right? Okay, cool.
And how you can expand that, you know, because sometimes we limit ourselves on our why, and it's just limited. And how can you expand it from a family to a community, from a community to a city, to a state, and give yourself permission to kind of go beyond that, right?
Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. I love this stuff so much. I feel like I could talk about it for hours.
I know, me too.